A boring cigar left smoking between a cusp's fingers, and a severed eyeball lasted for meters across the room. This is how the world's most ruthless mafia bosses actually meet their end. Men who ruled empires of blood and billions in cash, wiped out in a fraction of seconds by a single mistake, or a brutal betrayal from their closest friends. Those are the terrifying final moments of legends like Pablo Escobar and Al Capone. Welcome to the Dark Chapter. Dutch Schultz. Date October 3rd, 1935. Location New York, New Jersey. Inside the small place Chop House restaurant on Park Avenue, one of New York's most dangerous gangsters was having dinner with his main, Dutch Schultz. His real name was Arthur Flegenheimer. Was relaxed, happy, and content. He did not know that his empire was closing around him at that very moment. For 10 years, Schultz had made a huge fortune throughout illegal alcohol and gambling and extortion. He ruled parts of the Bronx and Manhattan with triple currency. But by 1935, things had changed. Prohibition was over, and federal agents were watching his illegal business. Schultz became the main target of U.S. Attorney Thomas Dewey, the man responsible for putting the biggest mafia bosses in New York in prison. Schultz made a crazy decision. He wanted to assassinate Attorney Thomas Dewey. When he told his idea to the National Crime Syndicate, led by legends like Lucky Luciano and Meyer Lansky, they completely rejected. They told him, if you kill a prosecutor, the government will bring hell and fury down on all of us. But Schultz did not care. He said he will do it himself. That was when the other mafia leaders made their decision. Schultz had to die. That night, Schultz arrived at the restaurant with three of his men. They ate steak, drank whiskey, and talked about the business. At 10:15 p.m., Schultz got up and went to the restroom. At that exact moment, two men entered the restaurant. They were professional killers from murdering the murder organization. One of the killers followed Schultz into the restroom, opened the door, and boom, one bullet hit Schultz in the stomach, and another hit his side. At the same time, in the dining room, the second killer opened the fire on Schultz's three men. He killed them all instantly in a matter of seconds. The restaurant filled with gun smoke and blood. The killer escaped into the night. Miraculously, Schultz was still alive. He dragged himself out of the restroom bleeding. He was rushed to a New York hospital. Doctors operated on him for hours, but the damage was too bad. As the pain medicine began to work, Schultz started to see things and talked unclearly. He rambled about his money, his enemies, and something buried in upstate New York. According to investigators, he was talking about a huge fortune hiding in an iron box filled with cash, gold, and bonds. He said it was near the Catskill area of New York. To this day, no one has ever found this treasure. Is the treasure real, or was it just a dream of a dying man? No one knows. Dutch Schultz dying the following evening, on October 24, 1939. Pablo Escobar, Envigado, Colombia. The feared leader of the Medellin cartel surrendered to the authorities. He agreed to stop the bloody violence on one condition. He would build his own prison, a place he called La Catedral. Construction began immediately. Escobar's men cleared the land and built high walls, watchtowers, and electric fences. But inside, the place did not look like a prison at all. It had a football field, a bar, a jacuzzi, and even a waterfall. Escobar's room had a large king-size bed, a luxury sound system, and a heater. He could host his friends, family, and cartel partners wherever he wanted. The armed guards standing outside were loyal to him, not to the government. For Pablo Escobar, this prison was just another place. From there, he continued to run his drug business. The drugs kept moving, the money kept coming, and the visitors never stopped. They brought in politicians, family members, and even killed enemies, all under his control. But by 1992, rumors spread that he had tortured and killed two of his former business partners inside La Catedral. This was a big embarrassment for the government in Bogota, and they could not ignore it. When officials asked to transfer him to a real military prison in July 22, 1992, Colombian forces surrounded the prison. But when they went inside, Escobar was gone. He had escaped through a secret exit built into the mountain. For over a year, a special search unit turned and founded by the United States hunted Escobar. Informants tracked his phone calls and movements through Medellin. He barely survived several raids until December 2nd, 1993, in Medellin, Colombia. The police intercepted a phone call from Escobar to his son. They traced the signal to the middle-class neighborhood. When they closed in and surrendered him, Escobar and his bodyguard tried to escape across to the roof of the house. The roof became a place for a short gunfight. Escobar was hit and fell into a red-tiled roof. He was dead at the age of 44. James Y.D. Bolger, October 2018, Hazleton Federal Penitentiary, West Virginia. This bullet is much more merciful than what happened in this next story. Imagine an 18-year-old man locked in a cell with his worst enemies. James had been in this prison for less than 12 hours. The old man, former Irish mob boss, was once the most feared man in South Boston. He spent his final years going from one federal prison to another. Wherever he went, he suffered from medical problems, bad behavior punishments, and constant fights with other prisoners who saw him as an easy target. Late the night before he arrived at Hazleton, a famous and very violent prison, the prisoners describe its reputation in two words: mountain of gangsters. The prison guards took him to his section. Around 10 p.m., Bolger was in a wheelchair. He looked weak, old, and very tired. But for the man inside Hazleton, Bolger's past was not forgotten. He was not just a gangster. He was an FBI informant. In any federal prison, being an informant was a death sentence. By sunrise on October 30th, the news had spread through the whole building. A famous prisoner had arrived. Someone whispered his name, and within minutes, everyone knows exactly who was sitting alone in cell 132. And around 6 a.m., two prisoners walked straight through Bolger's cell. Both were dangerous criminals from organized crime, serving long sentence with nothing to lose. They did not hesitate, and they did not run. They simply went inside the cell and closed the door behind them. What happened next lasted less than 2 minutes. The two men attacked Bolger with a padlock wrapped inside a sock. This was a weapon that was easy to hide, but very deadly in a small room. They beat him on the head. His face was hit repeatedly. Later, the guards found a terrible scene. Bolger was lying on his side in his wheelchair. His face was beaten so badly that he could not be recognized. The attack was personal and meant to send a message. Bolger was not a regular prisoner. He was a rat. The medical team arrived quickly, but there was nothing they can do. At 6:23 a.m., James Y.D. Bolger was pronounced dead. Bugsy Siegel, Las Vegas, Nevada. Bugsy Siegel had partnered with a nightclub owner named Billy Wilkerson to build a luxury resort and casino. When Wilkerson ran out of money, Siegel offered him $1 million to buy a share in the business. Siegel had made his name and reputation in New York through illegal alcohol and murders during Prohibition. He was cruel and extremely violent. Other gangs called him Bugsy because of his crazy temper and anger, but he hated that name. Anyone who dared to call him Bugsy to his face was risking their life. Siegel took total control of the project and banished Wilkerson out of the game. He changed the name of the resort to the Flamingo. He wanted to build something Las Vegas had never seen before: a luxury hotel filled with plum trees, expensive restaurants, and fancy Hollywood style. But the cost became too high. Siegel kept borrowing more and more money from the mafia. Every time they asked him about the money and the profits, he made excuses and asked for more cash. What started as a simple investment turned into a financial disaster. By early June, the mafia bosses had reached their limit. They believed Siegel had lost control, or that he was stealing from them. It did not matter of them if it was true or false. For the mafia, the Flamingo was an embarrassment, and someone had to pay. June 20 at 1947, Beverly Hills, California. Siegel was sitting at home, just reading the Los Angeles Times at 10:45 p.m. Suddenly, 9 bullets broke through the window of his house. 4 bullets hit Siegel, 2 on the head and 2 on the body. One of the bullets pulled his right eye out of its socket, and the eye landed 4.5 meters away in the room. He died in a fraction of a second. The shooter disappeared in the blink of an eye. There were no witnesses, no description of the car, and no one was ever charged with the crime. But what happened after the murder sent a very clear message. Within hours on that same night, Siegel's replacement arrived in Las Vegas and took over the management of the Flamingo. There were no arguments and no delays. The change went smoothly, as if it had planned from the very beginning. Joe Masseria, April 15, 1931, Coney Island, Brooklyn. Giuseppe Masseria ruled the American Mafia with an iron fist for 10 years. He was violent, angry, and did not know how to compare or understand others. But by the spring of 1931, the criminal underworld was in total chaos. A brutal war was going on, known as the Stella Maris War. It was a deadly fight for power and the future of organized crime in America. Masseria had made so many enemies that it was impossible for him to survive. That day, Masseria arrived at Nova Villa Tomorrow, a quiet restaurant in Coney Island where he felt safe. He was having what he saw was a friendly dinner with one of the few men he still trusted, Charles Lucky Luciano, his right-hand man. What Masseria did not know was that Luciano had planned the betrayal that would end his life. Inside the restaurant, the two men ate normally, pasta, wine, and cigars. Everything seemed peaceful and perfect. But outside the restaurant, 4 of Luciano's most dangerous allies were waiting in a car. Vito Genovese, Albert Anastasia, Joe Adonis, and Benjamin Bugsy Siegel. Yeah, that Bugsy. Each of them wanted a new world, a world who housed the trio of Masseria and the old bosses. Just after 3 p.m., Luciano excused himself from the table, saying he needed to use the restroom. Of course, he never come back. Minutes later, the killer's squad entered through the side door. Masseria was still sitting with a cigar in his hand and playing cards spread on the table. He did not have time to understand or react when the bullets started flying. The attack was fast, organized, and merciless. Many bullets hit Masseria's chest, back, and head. He fell down onto the table. The playing cards scattered, and the cigar was still burning and smoking between his fingers. By the time the killers disappeared into the darkness, Masseria was dead. He was lying in a scene that will become one of the most famous images in mafia history. Luciano returned a few moments later with the police. He acted like a shocked survivor, but the investigators discovered the truth immediately. There was no sign of a fight, no flipped chairs, and no defensive wounds on the victim. Masseria trusted the man who walked through the door so much that he stayed in his seat until he was shot. The Valentine's Day Massacre. The date 14 February 1829. In Chicago. We were in the middle of Prohibition in America, and the city of Chicago was divided. The Al Capone gang controlled the south side, and the Bugs Moran gang controlled the north side. For many years, the two sides fight hard to control illegal alcohol, gambling, and extortion. By winters, the tension had reached a breaking point. In that morning, the Moran men gathered in a warehouse on North Clark Street. We're waiting for a truck full of some glad whiskey. They surround the chamber point was arranged with a contact in Detroit uniformly. This shipment was a trap. Around 10:30 in the morning, a black Cadillac pulled up outside the warehouse. The car was modified to look like a police car. 4 men get out. 2 were wearing Chicago police uniform, and 2 were wearing suits and long coats. Inside the warehouse, the The 7 Moran men were not worried when the police entered. Police raids were a normal part of business in Chicago's underworld. The men obeyed orders without fighting back. They stood face down against the brick wall with their hands raised. Seconds later, the fake police opened the fire with shotguns and Thompson submachine guns. They fired over 17 bullets into the backs of 7 men. When the shooting stopped, the gunman used their shotgun to shoot again. They wanted to make sure no one was left alive. In just a few seconds, the North Side gang was completely wiped out. The killers then executed their escape plan perfectly. The 2 men in suits pretended to be under arrested. They walked out with their hands raised. Well, the fake police officers held the guns to their backs. Any eyewitness on the street would look at them and say, "Oh, the police are here." They stopped a crime and arrested the criminals. The colleagues then drove away calmly. When the real police arrived, they found 7 bodies full of bullets. Some of them were hard to recognize. Frank Duesenberg, one of Marion's men, was shot many times, but he was still breathing. When the police asked him who shot him, he whispered, "No one shot me," and died minutes later. Their leader, Bugs Moran himself, survived the massacre. He arrived late, saw the police car outside, turned around and left before entering the warehouse. Moran later spoke to the reporters and said his famous line, "Only Capone would kill like this." But Al Capone was on vacation in Florida at that time. To prove he was innocent, no one was ever convicted for the massacre. But the message was clear. The South Side had won. This pastoral attack shocked all of America. It marked the beginning of the end for the old gangster era. To this day, the Valentine's Day Massacre remains one of the most famous murders in the crime history. Billions and the cash and the ultimate power couldn't save them. Empires fall in seconds, and betrayal always comes from within. I am Yahya. Let me know in the comments which ending shocked you the most, and subscribe for the next dark chapter. See you in the next video.